Hi, I'm Cat Scothorne, I'm 20 and I'm an activist with This Is Rigged. So This Is Rigged is a kind of climate and cost of living group and a non-violent direct action group. So we're demanding the Scottish Government vocally opposes all new oil and gas and that they secure a fair and fully funded transition for oil workers. So we believe that direct action is one of the most effective means to get that, and we have tried other methods. You know, we've emailed the First Minister, we've been to FMQs and asked questions for 9 weeks in a row, and we've kind of just escalated from there because, you know, we need an answer to these demands and we need it now, so it's too urgent to not take direct action, basically.
So This Is Rigged is a pretty powerful name. It's a very, very good name. What's behind it?
Well, one part is that the entire system is rigged like an oil rig, and it's meant to be an expression that we can't just have environmental climate movements as siloed off from the rest of issues of injustice anymore. It's just too late for that, and it just means that people who come to the movement feel like they have to leave behind their other things that they care about, like anti-racism or class struggle or a bunch of other things, and it shouldn't be like that because the climate crisis is the injustice of the century. You know, it like brings all these issues together and makes them worse, and is kind of rooted in all of these causes like patriarchy and colonialism and classism. So it doesn't make sense to be a climate or environmental movement, and This Is Rigged sums up that kind of thing, that it's all these systems working together that we need to fight all at once with like solidarity on multiple fronts.
Yesterday Rishi Sunak announced 100 new oil and gas licences would be approved before the Tories leave office, so that's the plan. What's the response from This Is Rigged to that?
Fucking outrage and non-violent war, honestly, because they can't do this. This is an act of mass murder at this point, you know, and we've seen thousands being killed from the wildfires and heatwave in Europe, and so many more previously in India and Pakistan in the past few years, all over the world. You know, I can't even begin to list how many atrocities have happened because of the climate crisis. And they know this, you know, nobody is under any illusion that climate is caused by the fossil fuel industry. Yeah. We can't pretend that we don't know that anymore. It's been out in the open for decades now. And to not implement a fair transition and to not stop new oil is just, it's an act of mass murder, and it can't be seen as anything else. So we're going to do everything in our power to try and stop that.
Talk to me about the Nae Laird's, Nae Masters action the other day, because that was very cool.
Yeah, so for a while we've been doing talks and drawing inspiration from the Highland Land League, which did a lot to resist the Highland clearances in the 1800s, and they were key in getting the Crofting Rights Act passed in 1886, I believe. And so they're amazing, and they did, you know, occupations, they did rent strikes, they did huge acts of civil resistance across the Highlands and Islands, and I think bringing that to the fore now is just a reminder that Scotland's always had incredible civil resistance movements from the beginning. Really, it's had this amazing like tradition of activism, like all other countries, but it's good to remember ours specifically so that we know how to do it again and what worked and what traditions to draw on. So the people are mightier than a lord was the slogan that the Land League, obviously that's an English translation, used to mobilise people and give people inspiration. So we thought, let's do it again now. And who is better to target than the king, you know, the modern day laird who controls much too much of our land, and is getting a 45% pay rise in 2 years. And we wanted to link him and say he's not the only modern day laird, it's also people like Jim Ratcliffe, the owner of INEOS, the people who own the oil companies which are using Scottish land, and so we need to fight for like that land and that future and actually stand up to these lairds again.
Absolutely. So what did you do? You
spray painted a portrait of King Charles in the National Port Gallery with the slogan of the Highland Land League, the people are mightier than a lord. And it was someone from Portugal who came over to do it, which made it really like powerful, because he was literally saying, I'm in 40-degree heat in the shade right now, like you guys need to do something.
Tell us a bit about that, like why you targeted FMQs, why it was important that the Scottish Parliament was also a site of kind of protest.
Yeah, well, we kind of started and we were like, we've got these two demands that need to be answered. We're very confident in them. We need an answer from the Scottish Government now. The Scottish Parliament was set up to be this more transparent version of Westminster. You know, even the architecture and the open galleries meant to be like your politicians are accountable to you. And we were like, well, if they're really accountable to us, let's go and ask them these questions and see if we get an answer. And so we just went in and started doing that, and there were so many people interested in it as well. I think so many people were excited by the idea of actually being able to talk to their politician and not just get the same email back written by a civil servant with the same shite in it. Like, people wanted to come and keep doing this, and I think the response was also quite angering, because there was just met with confusion, anger, no kind of desire to reply. It was seen as troublesome and anti-democratic, it was sometimes depicted at, which was insane. So we just thought we'd keep going, and then they put in a 6-month ban, and we had to change tactics, basically.
So speaking of changing tactics, today you spray painted Holyrood.
Yeah.
Talk about that. Tell us why you spray painted Holyrood.
It's the second time we've done it, actually, because we first did it after they banned us from FMQs, and we said this will escalate into shutting down the oil industry in Scotland, and again didn't get a reply. So today we just thought, yesterday all the heat is on Westminster. Rishi Sunak is the one who's announced these 100 new oil and gas licences, but it's coming out of Scotland's North Sea, and the Scottish Government's silence has been deafening. There's a few MSPs, a few MPs who are against new oil, but there is not an announcement by the Scottish Government unequivocally opposing all new oil and gas licences. Like, there's been the draft energy transition plan, and they've said there might be a presumption against new oil. All of this is just these airy-fairy things which aren't coming into a solid stance, which is exactly what we need to have right now, because there's no ambiguity about new oil. Like, it's a no, it has to be a no. So their kind of inability to stand up to Westminster is just morally unjustifiable, and it's failing everyone in Scotland right now. So yeah, Friends of the Earth Scotland has so many resources on what the Scottish Government specifically could do with its devolved powers. One is the bare minimum, it's saying no to all new oil and gas. Nicola Sturgeon did come out against the Campbell oil field after the tireless efforts of activists, and that was not went ahead. Shell pulled out of it, and that's not the only reason, but that helped build up that pressure against new oil. So we need to do that every time. If we, the suppliers of the UK's oil, are saying no, that's extremely powerful, and that's the start. The other thing is that they have complete control of a fair transition fund. Some of it they get from Westminster, some of it they get from taxpayers, and they are not using that to actually follow the demands of oil workers. So yeah, over 1,000 oil workers were surveyed by Friends of the Earth and Platform, and they said we want a fair transition to renewables. We want our retraining paid for so that we don't have to pay out of pocket. We want public ownership of energy and increased security and kind of say of all workers in their workplaces. So clear demands there, nothing ambiguous about that, and that's from the fossil fuel workers themselves. In my eyes, the Scottish Government just needs to follow it now. What are they doing not following that? And it's because they're listening to the CEOs and the oil and gas lobby representatives, not the workers themselves.
You will face lots of criticism over the disruptive nature of the action in a similar way to Just Stop Oil do. You're preventing people going about their work. It's not lorry drivers at Grangemouth who are responsible for the climate emergency. How do you respond to those criticisms?
Yeah, well, I'd say from criticisms from people actually being disrupted, then, we're sorry that you're caught in that disruption. That's not what anyone wants. We know who's responsible for this, and it is, fossil fuel CEOs and the governments who don't stand up to them. But disruption is the only way we're going to be listened to. Like I said, we tried all these other tactics, and that infrastructure, even though it's not the people operating its fault, is causing harm, and it can be seen as a murder machine. Grangemouth consumes more energy than Edinburgh and Glasgow combined, and it's entirely based on oil and gas. So it has to be shut down. We have to put our bodies in the way of these machines killing people in other parts of the world and say no more.
What's the next plan? What's coming next?
Next plan, sustained disruption first of all. The actions aren't over, and after that, I'm not sure, but continued disruption, continued targeting of the people responsible. That's all I can promise.